Hello, you prolific little marketing bees. You're tuned into episode 37 of the Marketing Buzzword Podcast.
This is the Marketing Buzzword Podcast, the podcast where we dissect the world's most common marketing buzzwords. Hold on tight. We are about to fly around the beehive to see the latest buzzwords that stuck to the marketing bees.
Hello again, and welcome back to the Marketing Buzzword Podcast. This is the podcast which helps you to understand what all of these business and marketing buzzwords actually mean, and whether or not they can be helpful going forward. I'm your host, Ben Roberts, and in this show, I'm the marketing bee in charge of making sure I can get on the right guests and ask the right questions to make sure that these words and phrases actually make sense. And in today's show, we're going to make sense of the word podcasting. I know you guys are probably already fans because you're listening to a podcast, but this is your first time tuning in. And or people tell you need to create podcasts. I really want to sort of share with you what the options are around podcasting. Before I do so, this podcast is powered by Talkative. Talkative is a company that brings together web chat, voice calls, video calls, and co-browsing together in one package into your website. Essentially allows you to collaborate and communicate effectively with your customers without them even having to leave your website. It's real, it's human, and it's real time, and it's just real conversations. Find out more at talkative.uk. Also, just a reminder that my crowdfunding campaign for the book starts on August the 1st. We're literally going to be just over a week away from when this episode launches. Please get involved. I'm so excited about this. The campaign is on a website called Publishizer. There's loads of details coming up on the marketingbuzzword.com website this week. Please follow me on social media for more updates at Roberts_Ben_M on Instagram and what else? Twitter, that's it. And then obviously Ben M. Roberts on LinkedIn as well. On all those places, or sign up to the emails on the website and I'll let you know about the book. Really excited for that. Cannot wait. Right, that's more enough about me. It's time to introduce this week's Buzzword Bee. Now, this week's expert Buzzword Bee is a guy called Mark Asquith. Mark is a serial entrepreneur who has built globally successful design, marketing, software and digital businesses since he quit his real job in 2005. A passionate podcaster, global keynote speaker, and all-round helpful bloke, Mark is the co-founder of podcast websites and the creator of Excellence Expected. He also has a terribly embarrassing beard, but those are his words, and I actually like his beard because it's so much better than the one that I can grow. So, really excited about this episode. I am a big fan of podcasting. For me, it's like my medium in the way that I communicate, and Mark has done some really interesting things in the podcasting space, so he seems like the perfect expert buzzword bee to bring on and help decipher this term. So, that's enough from me. Let's get on with the show. Hi Mark, and welcome to the podcast.
Hey buddy, how you doing?
Oh, I'm so good. The weather is still actually just about holding up okay here in South Wales, and I'm so glad to get you on, Mark.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure, man. We're in Sheffield at the minute, and it's beautiful weather. It's been stunning for about what feels like 12 years.
I know.
Now. It's crazy.
It's crazy. The UK, and we're actually talking about the weather in a positive sense. It's absolutely, it's unbelievable.
It is, man. But no, it's good. It's nice to hear a fellow Brit's voice as well.
Oh, definitely. But we aren't here to actually talk about the weather as much as us British people would absolutely thrive off talking about the weather for a full half hour. I think we'd better talk about podcasting, Mark, because I think that's something that you're absolutely smashing in the space at the moment. And I want to give, before we sort of dive really into it, can you give some context around what is it about podcasting at the moment that's giving it such a big buzz at the moment? Because it's a term that I was just chatting with you before we went on air. It was like, I do this podcast twice a week every week, and I talk about buzzwords. I was like, I haven't talked about podcasting, and it's like something that everyone's talking about at the moment. So why are people talking about it, Mark?
Well, I think it's because it's tipped over into. It's not. Well, actually, I'm lying to you. It's not tipped over into the mainstream, but more and more people are now aware of it. You know, if you think about the Netflix generation, Netflix taught us about on-demand stuff when it comes to content. Then you look at Uber. Uber taught us about on-demand, come and get me. And then you talk about Deliveroo and Uber Eats, and that taught us on-demand anything really. And then you look at gin in London, they will go and buy you anything and it will be with you within an hour or two. Like you can order anything from them. So like podcasting's been around for such a long time. It's been around for 10, 12 years, but it was really reserved for people that thought it was like a hobbyist thing. And now actually people are starting to realize that it's just more on-demand content. It's on-demand radio, it's digital radio for the on-demand generation. And that's why it's starting to become quite interesting. Then, of course, you've got your kind of business people that think that podcasting is just quote unquote entrepreneurial. And obviously that's a right old load of crap. It's not, believe it or not, there are more podcasts out there that don't have anything to do with business than do have to do with business. So we all need to get over that. But it's, I think it's just because we've been trained, our behaviors have changed over the last 10 years. Technology has become more readily available. It's just easier to access. But not only that, we understand why and how on-demand everything is accessible now, where we didn't do that 5-6 years ago. It's just the way that technology in the world has moved.
Yeah, it seems like podcasting is one of those, almost it's a technology that's been around for ages, but there was a small revolution that suddenly meant it became accessible to everyone really quickly because they already had the technology in their hands in the form of their phone. So suddenly someone went, look, we'll put it into a phone instead of you having to tune in live through a radio station, and suddenly it's like, hang on, this is like one of the oldest forms of mass communication, and then suddenly with a phone, we're suddenly like, oh shit, we can suddenly do this absolutely whenever, wherever, listen on the go, and that's the bit I absolutely love about it, and that's why radio is still so popular. It's everywhere. You can listen to it doing whatever you want, whereas video you still can't.
Yeah, and you've got to consider as well that, video is an active thing. You've got to be actively watching that. It consumes most of your attention. Even if you talk about second and third screen use cases where you're watching TV and you're on your phone or your iPad, even then, to really get the content in, you've got to watch the content. And with podcasting, you can do it in a passive way. You can do it at the gym, walking the dog. You can do it when you are, just out doing your shopping, or if you're driving or cleaning your house. It's just... And take it one step further with the advent of the smart speakers, and you've got the Google HomePod, you've got Apple's HomePod, you've got Google Assistant, and you've got, of course, Amazon Echo with the Alexa stuff built in. It's just available, it's just there. And a lot of people, I think, don't even know it's podcasting. If you think about someone saying, Alexa, turn on Mark Maron, do they know it's a podcast? I don't know. Probably not. They probably just think I'm listening to Mark Maron's latest thing. I don't really care where it comes from. So it's become more democratized. It's much less about, being all stiff and saying this is a podcast. It's not. It's just audio content when you want it.
I absolutely love it. I mean, over here in the UK, obviously the BBC, for example, are going huge on podcasting at the moment. They're doing all their normal radio shows. All the presenters are going off and they're doing spin-off podcasts. I mean, for the Football World Cup recently, I was glued into their World Cup Daily podcast, and it was one of those things that actually it supplements radio shows. And people are like, oh, podcasts taking over, they're going to ruin live radio. No, I thought it was an amazing supplement to all the stuff that's happening on live radio. But I do have one question for you on the points that you raised there, Mark, and it's one that I'm really intrigued to hear your thoughts on. Is one thing you mentioned was that actually podcasting is slightly more of a passive consumption, whereas video is more immersive, and obviously with things like VR, it's all immersive. Now, because podcasting is slightly more passive, does that make it slightly less impactful than other forms of content or other mediums of being able to, just broadcast mediums? Is it too passive, the fact that actually so many people start podcasts and then stop doing them so quickly because or is there a different reason, for example, that maybe most podcasts don't last past 7 episodes or whatever the stat is?
Well, it depends. What are you measuring as impact?
Ooh, well, I think for me, I guess the most obvious stat that everyone's tracking is downloads. I mean, that's almost a pie in the sky figure. I mean, what does a download mean compared to an active user? I mean, it's hard to get some of those metrics sometimes, isn't it? So
far, yes, we may have something for that in the future. Okay, so there's a couple of questions there. Is it less impactful than video? No. It's not. It's just different impact. It's different type of impact. And if you look at the Edison research, the amount of people that say they've bought something based on listening about it on a podcast, the stats are ridiculous. The stats are ridiculous because this is I have to choose to listen to you, Ben. There are 1,000 marketing shows out there, 1,000. In fact, there are probably 10,000. So if I'm listening to you, I actually give a shit about what you're telling me to do. So I'm much more engaged. So impact-wise, from a marketing and from a brand perspective, massive impact. Massive impact. The second part of the question was, why do people stop after 7 episodes? Honestly, because it's fucking hard work. Like, it's not easy. It's not turn this thing on. And even though I'm the person that tells people to start off by plugging a microphone into a phone and just recording something, that's all about getting over the fear of hearing your own voice. But honestly, to actually be a podcaster is hard work. You've got to plan the show out. You've got to record the show. You've got to get it edited. You've got to write the show notes. You've got to get it online. You've got to start to market the thing because, hell, once you've created the show, it's not even the biggest part of the job. It's marketing the damn thing that's tough. So people think it's easy. It's like when you start a blog when you're a bit younger. You think, I'm going to start a blog, and you do it for 2 weeks. Then you get inconsistent, and then you never blog again, and then you start a new one in 2 years. That's the same thing for most people with podcasting, but I actually don't mind that. And the reason that I don't mind that is that if someone does 7 episodes of a show and they think, do you know what, this is too much work, they might stick it on the shelf and they might come back to it in 2 years when there's a requirement to do something else that podcasting, the medium, will fit into. And they say, do you know what, actually, I know how to podcast. I only did 7 shows, but why don't we, I can do that. So, a lot of people that do 7 shows, and they get slated at these, a lot of the places that you go and watch, and you watch kind of the old guard of podcasting kind of sometimes slating people that only do 7 shows. And, why are you bothering? Like, bollocks to that. Like, you've literally got to be in the pool to learn how to swim, and you can get back out of the pool and dive back in when you're more confident. That's what it's about. So I actually don't mind it failing after 7 episodes. If you want to dip your toe in, crack on. It's not hurting anyone.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really interesting point because I know it took me a while because this is my second podcast. So my first podcast was one that I came back, I think it was from Social Media Marketing World in San Diego, probably back in 2016. God, that feels like feeling old now already. But I remember coming back, I was like, look, there were no people started talking about podcasting more and more, and no one was doing it in the space that I was currently working in. So I set one up. And I tell you what, again, like these people, I think I lasted 27 episodes, which was huge and amazing, and I loved it. But I didn't quite appreciate, again, like, I think that's why a lot of people do fail, is they don't appreciate how long it actually takes. By the time you've not only, especially if you have a guest podcast where you have to find the guest, schedule the time, record the podcast, do the edit, and then do the promotion bit. Again, people don't necessarily realize it's like blogging or whatever form of content you do. They call that, that 80-20 rule, where 80% should actually be promoting the content and 20% should be creating it. And actually the 20%, it still takes a lot of time. So imagine how much time that 80% should take, because listeners don't. The good thing I love about podcasting is people who are really putting their podcasts out there are really passionate about it, and the fact that it's still hard for people to find just find podcasts because there is still a select number and the algorithms aren't there. It's still, and it's such a crowded space, especially in marketing podcasts. It's really hard to find new ones. So I absolutely love that people are going out there and dipping their toes in, and then we'll come back at a later date because things change, times change, people change. Nothing stays the same, does it?
Yeah, exactly. That you've got to consider that things look different the more time passes, and you've got to consider that 2, 3, 4 years ago when we talked about just then Social Media Marketing World 2016, 2 years ago, I think there was about half the current podcasts that there are now. But look how many blogs there are. There's potential discoverability problems and qualms, but ultimately, I don't think that's the problem. I think it's just an awareness thing. I think it's just, look, this is available. That's all we need to be considering is that, we tell people, and it's much easier to explain it now. If someone says, what's your podcast? What is it? How do I get to it? You say, well, look, it's like Netflix for audio, and I produce a show. It's an independent show. Here's where you go to listen to it. So it's very difficult to kind of, it's very difficult to make an excuse that you shouldn't be podcasting because it is becoming more and more accessible. And it's still, you've just said that there are so many shows out there. There are, but it's still a tiny,
it's still
tiny, tiny, tiny industry, and we're still at the ground floor of it.
And I think this actually leads really nicely onto sort of a little bit about what you do and actually how sort of people there actually being able to help themselves get discovered. So briefly, it's obviously you have this podcast website, yeah?
Yes.
So what is different about a podcast website? Is it different from a normal website, or how do people then look at potentially, if they were decided, because this isn't necessarily the podcast that tells you how to start a podcast and how to do this, but if people wanted to, what should people be thinking about in terms of promoting a podcast, in terms of how it may or may not be different from promoting any other form of content or any other medium?
Okay, so there's a couple of things with that one. Basically, there's a difference between people who podcast for fun and people who want to podcast to get something out of it. So at podcast websites and with our Podcast Success Academy and some of the new tools that we're building, that's very, very much focused on people who want to build a branded audio platform and become an audio influencer in their niche, just like myself, like JLD, like Pat Flynn, on the entrepreneurial side, like Mark Maron, like Joe Rogan. These are influencers in their niche, and they've used audio to do that. So yeah, you don't need a website, you don't need a branded platform to be a podcaster. But if you want to become an audio influencer, someone that can command an audience, then you need a home base. And podcasters get shortchanged when it comes to branding, when it comes to design, when it comes to building a platform. We have to cobble things together. So we create a podcast websites because actually people want to become audio influencers and they don't have one place to do all of that. So that's why we created that platform. And we do a lot of good work with a lot of good people, to be fair. It's really exciting stuff.
And I think it's one of those things, isn't it? That there is a difference in podcasting, and people don't, I think you've alluded to it right at the start of the episode, people don't necessarily have to go into it for one thing or another, and it's okay to pivot as well in some of these things. Like people say, so I've got to stop a podcast and do a new one, and you lose what you're trying. And it takes a while to find your voice, and that was something that I really discovered. I mean, I'm lucky I did a bit of student radio back in university, so I sort of had an idea of the type of show I would produce and how I work. But it's one of those really weird mediums where it takes, I think, a really long time for you to understand how you put a show together and how you put your stamp on things, because it is so weird when you hear your voice back for the first couple of times.
It is, yeah, and that's what I always tell people. It comes up often on my free coaching session on Friday, what should I do first? And it's easy. You just plug something in that can record into something that can record. So you plug a microphone into a computer and you record something that you want to talk about, and you just listen back, and you get used to putting yourself down on tape, as it were. It's not, you don't have to have the perfect show. My first show was a Batman show called Two Shots to the Head, and I still love that show. The quality of the audio was crap, but I loved doing that, and I would reactivate that today if I still had the time to do it. And yeah, was that perfect? No. Did we get listeners? Yes. People just wanted to tune in to hear two guys shooting the shit about Batman. So you don't have to spend a lot of time crafting a show. Having said that, I've been working with the guy Steve Lazarus over at Your London Legacy. He's one of my coaching members. He's a podcast websites member, and he came to me and said, "Mark, I want a podcast. I don't know what about." So I mentored him through, and we came up with this really amazing story-based concept, which is a podcast just for London. It's telling the timeless stories of London's hidden personalities. And we've really dug deep on it. We've crafted the narrative. We've crafted how he's going to write the intros and how he's going to market this thing and how he's going to edit the thing and what the music should do and when it should fade and should it run underneath the intro. Are we going to have intro music or not? Is it going to be more of a story podcast? And holy crap, you listen to it, and it is just wonderful. Like from day one, it is one of the best podcasts I've ever heard. So that there are varying degrees of that. The thing that I would say is that the barrier to entry for being a podcaster has never been lower. It's easy to buy a microphone. It's easy to set up a site with something like podcast websites and do all your media hosts. And it's easy to just syndicate your show out. So you don't have to put all the work in. You can just dip your toe in and see what people think. The second that you get that first bit of feedback with someone saying, "Holy crap, this is awesome," or "I really enjoyed that," you're going to be over the moon. You're going to be elated. So yeah, it's yes, like everything, there are varying degrees of intensity and quality and planning that you can go to. But actually, plug the mic in, start talking, listen to yourself back, and just get over the hump of hearing your own voice. That would be my advice to anyone.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's get over the fear factor. I think when I first started with my old company, I think I did it through it was Audacity, which is obviously a free software. I used my iPhone mic plugged into Skype, so I think I used the eCam recorder there. And so I think the whole thing pretty much cost me a couple of quid to do, and then you just sort of a syndicate. I think it was Libsyn. I think I used, and it's just like that. That's literally all it cost, and we've started reaching hundreds of people an episode, and it's like, whoa, this is crazy for that little cost, and people just buy into you. And I think it's an amazing way of showing potentially your personality without there, because you talk about these things like Sir Terry Wogan before he died, God rest his soul, but like him, people were saying that they felt like he was in the room with them, and it's amazing the impact that podcasting and having something in your ears can really have on people. And I think maybe it was a bit of a loaded question earlier, asking actually, is passive less impactful? Because we all remember a radio show or a host or something that you've had in your ears, and you can just remember exactly how they sound and how they've actually made you feel over that time. And I think it's an amazing thing that people should get involved in podcasting, because it has that level of connecting with you that still video doesn't quite, because it requires you to be, it can't be everywhere with you at any time.
Exactly, yeah. And people do. This is why people react so well to podcasts. It's why the engagement and the click-throughs, and not the click-throughs as such, but the engagement and the purchases that come off the back of brand awareness on a podcast are so high, because people do get familiar with you. So yeah, my show. Let's say I've got a show that gets 100 downloads an episode. It doesn't matter, because say if there's 40 people, 50 people that are downloading that and contributing to the 100. If I tell those 40 people to do something, they're going to do it. They will do it, because they're with me every week. So that's the power that you've got, and the power is in the niches when it comes to podcasting. You can be the audio influencer in gas registered plumbers within the South Yorkshire region who are over 40 years old. You can be that influencer and influence 5,000 people just in that tight, tiny little niche, and you can make a damn good living from it if you want to do that.
Yeah, no, 100%. Now, I want to sort of flip this then and say, okay, you're a business now, and you think, okay, podcasting is a medium. There, we've got the people or the skills who could be right to host a podcast. As a business, you get a lot of people that would go to, okay, what's the ROI of this? How are we going to make money and stuff? So if someone comes to their boss and says, I think we should start a podcast, I think we're going to get some really great listeners, potentially going to make some sales, and the boss says, what's going to be the ROI of podcasting? How do people go and explain to their boss, who may not necessarily be a tech mind, that podcasting is valuable and it actually can help make the business money?
I'd do something very simple. I'd just say, who are the people that make the sandwiches on demand in little kind of torpedo shapes? Who goes in there and lets you ask whether you want toast and cheese or whether you want olives and stuff? And, find out. If that boss says Subway, you're pretty sure that it's susceptible to marketing. Who are the people that do Big Macs? It's just marketing. It's just awareness. Now, if you can create entertaining content, because bear in mind, your boss watches TV, your boss listens to something, whether it's music, Spotify, whether it's whatever, doesn't matter. Your boss listens to something. So he makes his decisions and he's influenced by those things. That's all you're doing with this. If you want a return on your investment from podcasting, you better be damn sure that you know how to track it. You've got very good offers on there. You've got a landing page. You've got click-throughs that go through to that landing page so that you can track that. But ultimately, you should not be going into podcasting to make sales. You should be going into it to entertain and enhance your audience so that when they need your service, you are top of mind. That's what it's about. It's about being top of mind. So if you've got a plumbing podcast and it's all it is it's you talking about being a plumber, that's shit. What's the point? Unless you're targeting plumbers. If you're targeting plumbers, fine. But if what you want to do is build your plumbing practice, you need a podcast that tells people how to make the most of their water features in the garden, how to basically let them live through your podcast. And it just so happens that it's produced by John Smith's Plumbing Services.
Yeah, it's got to solve a problem, solve a need, offer value and advice about...
Or just entertain. Just entertain. That's the other thing. People think podcasting, like we're in this business niche, and it kind of drives me mad a little bit. Because everyone's like, yeah, you've got to add value first. You've got to do this. You've got to do that. No. Right, radio is not intended to add value. It's intended to entertain. Podcasting All it needs to do is entertain. Serial does not add value to my life. It does not, but it gets 90 million downloads because it's bloody entertaining.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I guess it also depends again on the type of audience, isn't it? It depends. Some depends on what they're tuning in for, and I guess that depends on your research before on what your audience wants. Depends on the type of podcast that you produce as well. Some of them, like you said, want to be pure mind. It's like different types of TV. Taking it from that, some people will like the Kardashians or Love Island because they think that it's mind-numbing and something they can just completely tune off and just relax and enjoy. Other people like really intense documentary style things. Some people like war films, some people like horror films. Different audiences like different things, and all you need to do is appeal to that audience at that time with the right something that they just want.
Yeah, and it's a funny one that because a lot of people will come into podcasting and kind of take that approach, which is perfect. But you've also got to consider the things that they might not know they want. You've got to come in there and say, just like the BBC did, they enhanced their content in other mediums by adding a podcast. That's it. They enhance the content in other mediums by adding a podcast. You look at a great example of this is like Walking Dead. I don't watch it, but there's a show like called Talking Dead as well, which is like a follow-up, and they've done it for like Big Brother's Little Brother and all that shit in the UK, and I'm sure there's one for that stupid Love Island show. It's enhancing the content. So if you had, and I'm sure there is one because I think Hannah here at Podcast Websites was going to make one, but I'm assuming there's a Love Island podcast. It's enhancing the content. It's not, you don't have to create content directly in your niche, assuming that people want to hear value or that they want to hear what you think they want to hear. You can get really interesting with that. You can get really kind of off center. So if you're wanting to sell football boots or you're wanting to sell football merchandise, you don't necessarily create a show about football. It might be something similar. So as an example of that, if you're wanting to sell football merchandise, you might just create another show that appeals to the type of people that are going to go to football matches. So that might be 25 to 40-year-olds who drink craft ale, who go out on Saturday afternoons, who want to spend more time with the family, X, Y, Z, all these different demographic and socioeconomic factors. Plug them in and create a show that talks to that audience, and then it just so happens to be sponsored by myfootballmerchandise.com. So you can get quite interesting with this stuff. That branded content piece is something that a lot of the big brands are doing, and we as smaller brands can do it as well. We could very easily do that.
Yeah, so it's almost what you're sort of saying then is podcasting gives you the opportunity to sort of think a little bit more outside the box and actually allows you to be a bit bolder and be a bit more expressive, because you don't have to talk about anything specifically it doesn't have to be directly related to your business. It's thinking about actually how does it entertain, and then how can you draw an audience in that may or may not like what you do, but they've enjoyed the content, which keeps them coming back. And I think that's a phenomenally different way of thinking about things, which isn't necessarily mainstream, which is what I want to get you on the show, Mark. I love it.
Well, that's good, man, and I appreciate that. And a really simple example of this that I'll give, and before we kind of wrap it, I'll give you a good example of this. If you want to sell tickets to a Spice Girls tribute band, you do not do a Spice Girls podcast. You just don't do that. What you do is a 90s nostalgia podcast for women or for men. Or for what, you target people with something else. You're like, oh, today, guys, we're going to talk about Match Football Magazine, and we're going to talk about Italia 90 football match. We're also going to talk about, some of the TV shows that were out there. We're going to tap into some of the TV shows from the early 90s. What about season 1 of the Power Rangers? And we're going to review all this stuff. Oh, by the way, did you know that in Sheffield City Hall there's a Spice Girls tribute act on? That's what you would do if you were a promoter and you were trying to sell this thing. Because you're dragging people in and tapping into the nostalgia, and then your job is to capture the serendipitous enthusiasm that they've got around, holy shit, yep, I'm in, because I'm in this 90s nostalgic vibe, and then suddenly someone's saying for 20 quid I can go see a Spice Girls band. Yes, please, I'll have that. So that's how we can start thinking. If we want to start getting some ROI, back to that question, if we want to start getting some ROI over it, don't sell what you're selling, sell the dream, sell the entertainment factor, and then when you've primed people ready, the old sort of jab, jab, right hook, is it?
Yeah.
You kind of go for that approach with it, but get them into a mood, get them into a zone with podcasting, with the audio. That's the way to do it.
I think another, to sort of wrap it up, another prime example of that, I think, is essentially like perfumes. It's just damn smelly liquid, and yet the way that they make you feel, and it's everything about that, because we haven't got smell-o-vision yet, and yet the way they talk about it on radio ads and TV ads, it's all about selling the dream. This is what you could have by spraying a little bit of this elderflower special liquid on you, and it's amazing the power that words have on you.
Yeah, definitely. That is definitely the way to do it. You got to tap into people's emotions. I always say this on one of the webinars that we do for podcast websites. Your show notes and your audio, everything around it, you should make people feel. Just make them feel something, then you got them. That's it. That's all you need to do.
Right, mate, you've pretty much dropped the mic there, and I think then that's almost a perfect way to wrap up the show. However, before I let you go, Mark, I've got to ask you the one question that I ask everyone else before they leave. And obviously this show is also about buzzwords and words and phrases. So, Mark, what buzzwords out there right now are you absolutely loving or absolutely hating? What is absolutely grinding your gears? Are you something you go, yes, I'm absolutely loving this term at the moment. It's really resonating with me.
There are two words that, when put together, make me want to set fire to the world, and they are crypto expert. Now, I believe in cryptocurrency and I believe in blockchain. I think the technology is great. I love that idea. And I think that open distribution, I think it's fantastic. All right, that decentralization, I think it's perfect. But it's been out about 15 minutes, right? Cryptocurrency has been out about 15 minutes. Now every fucker is a crypto expert. And it does my head in, man. Like, don't be a crypto expert and tell people that you're a crypto expert. Why don't we just all say we're all still learning about crypto? There's no need to be condescending and a bit of a twat on Twitter about it, is there?
Yeah, but learning crypto doesn't quite have the same thing on it, does it? That's why people do it, because they want to sound like they're better and that they're more advanced than everyone else. When actually, no, they're probably at the same level that anyone else. Just because you've put 10 quid into cryptocurrency doesn't make you a crypto investor.
Exactly, and believe me, there are those guys who are crypto investors who do know it, who have been there since day one. But then there's people who have changed their minds in the last 6 months and suddenly become crypto experts. Like, get in the sea. That's ridiculous.
Hey, brilliant. No, thanks so much for that, Mark. I think that is a beautiful way to end this episode. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on, and so my faith in getting you on to talk about this has been absolutely placed in the right area, because so much value and so much knowledge dropped by you.
Good, man. I really appreciate that. Thank you for saying that. It means a lot.
Hey, thanks, Mark. Take care, mate.
Cheers, buddy. Bye-bye.
Yes. I absolutely love the way that Mark comes across, the way he presents his ideas, his knowledge and experience. I love his sort of straight talking and no BS approach to things. It's really refreshing, and he was literally the perfect person to talk about podcasting and why it's important, the power it can have, and why you should get involved. So I know some of you will already have your own podcast, some of you will be thinking about it, some people would never have considered it before. Now hopefully breaking down this buzzword is hopefully something that you now go, I may want to explore that. Something else you may want to explore is obviously the crowdfunding campaign for the book on August the 1st. We're a month-long campaign. We're going to be giving so many cool bonuses away, really linked to the podcast. If you are a fan of the podcast, please do get involved. Follow me on any of the social media channels, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, Ben M. Roberts, everywhere, Ben space M space Roberts, or you can find the handles which are like Ben M. Roberts as well, or you can just sign up to the emails on the marketingbuzzword.com website. Thank you so much for listening. We'll be back on Thursday with another bite-sized buzzword. Goodbye.